If you know those words, then you know exactly what movie I'm about to review. Welcome to another movie review, and hello everybody, and I'm about to review a movie from the 1990s that is considered one of the absolute best films of that entire decade, and this is Apollo 13. Apollo 13 is an historical drama slash space disaster movie that emerged in 1995 by director Ron Howard and starring an incredible plethora of amazing actors. Apollo 13 is about the famous 1970 Apollo 13 mission that unfortunately did not go so well. While en route to the moon to land on it, three astronauts ultimately end up battling for survival while en route. Disaster strikes when their O2 tanks rupture, causing a big explosion that ultimately ends up leaving them basically struggling for survival. Now with their crippling shuttle, they have to rely on NASA and their own wits and basically their own experiences to ultimately, instead of going for the mission to land on the moon, now it's really all about them trying to basically get back to Earth safely. So that's pretty much the gist of the film in a nutshell, but it is literally one intense thrill ride, basically, to watch these three men struggle to basically find any way possible to survive along with the help of NASA. So being based on actual events, this movie really does capture what really did unfold back in 1970. That's pretty much the gist of the film in a nutshell, essentially. But without a doubt, this movie is just an incredible film from beginning to end. Every moment of this movie is amazing. Everything from the space shuttle launch, which honestly, the visual effects used to bring the space shuttle launch to life was just incredible. The acting performances alone, as I've said, look at these names. I mean, come on, you got Tom Hanks, Kevin Bacon, Bill Paxton, Gary Sinise, Ed Harris. I mean, what an incredible plethora, what an incredible lineup of actors to work on this movie. And honestly, I think in a way, this film did kind of help pave the way for later films that evolved into deep space, like Gravity and Interstellar. So naturally, and even Armageddon did kind of borrow elements from Apollo 13. In fact, Armageddon actually reused the shuttle launch sequence from Apollo 13. Ron Howard, just almost everything about this movie that he put into it is just incredible. And I mentioned in a couple of my earlier, well, actually, I've actually reviewed a film by Ron Howard. I reviewed Willow already, and I've actually mentioned in there that Ron Howard was a Roger Corman alumni. And it's interesting because Roger Corman actually does have a cameo in this movie, and he's not hard to miss. I mean, he's like, as soon as you see him, you should recognize him instantly. And I'm like, well, Ron Howard, well, even though Ron Howard got his start in acting long before he became a filmmaker, I mean, if anybody should know Ron Howard, he's probably best known from the shows Andy Griffith Show and Happy Days, and even got to work with George Lucas on American Graffiti. But then Roger Corman got a hold of him and got him to appear in a couple of Roger Corman productions, like Eat My Dust and Grand Theft Auto, which Grand Theft Auto, by the way, was Ron Howard's directorial debut. And of course, Ron Howard would go on to direct films like Night Shift, Splash, Gung Ho, Cocoon, of course, Willow, and then Backdraft, and Parenthood, and then eventually would go on to do Apollo 13. And of course, Ron Howard would go on to become an Oscar-winning director, since he'd gone on to win the Oscar for Best Director on A Beautiful Mind, and the film also took Best Picture, famously beating out Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, which, I'm not going to lie, I think that film should have won Best Picture, but Apollo 13 was released by Universal Pictures back in 1995, and the movie was an instant box office success. The film was an enormous hit when it debuted in theaters, and it ended up grossing worldwide a little over $355 million against its budget of $52 million, giving it, blockbuster status, and the film was adored by critics. Currently, it has a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, and like I said, it's considered one of the best films to emerge from the 90s. It's an intense and emotional thrill ride that literally is it's what you would call a bit of an arm clutcher from, well, like I said, it's kind of a build. It's a great build up to the space scenes, but when the disaster strikes, it's basically an arm clutcher from beginning to end. It's like you just want to do whatever you can. You just can't wait to see these three men get back on Earth safely, and it never lets up. Even for a PG rated film, this movie is just intense. It's very intense. And for its 140-minute time limit, like I said, this movie never lets up. This is considered by many to be Ron Howard's best film. I mean, I honestly would probably say, I mean, if I had to pick Ron Howard's best movie, this may be it. It does have a fair share of humor, and it's something that Ron Howard would duplicate in many of his films. I mean, obviously The Grinch, but there's something else I really ought to mention too about the movie. I actually learned that James Cameron was a uncredited visual effects consultant for this movie. And James Cameron has worked on movies that took place in space before. I mean, come on, Battle Beyond the Stars, Galaxy of Terror, Aliens. So yeah, I mean, he too has worked on films that took place in space. And notice that two of its actors, Bill Paxton and Ed Harris, both have worked with James Cameron. I mean, Bill Paxton on Terminator and Aliens and many others. And Ed Harris worked with James Cameron on The Abyss. And the movie was scored by James Horner, who, by the way, worked with James Cameron on on Aliens. And speaking of James Horner, not only do I have Apollo 13 here, but I also have the soundtrack on CD. The soundtrack, the score by James Horner, but not just the score by James Horner, but also many of the songs from the soundtrack, like Night Train by James Brown, Groovin' by the Young Rascals, Somebody to Love by Jefferson Airplane, I Can See for Miles by The Who, Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix, Spirit in the Sky by Norman Greenbaum, which, by the way, Spirit in the Sky actually appeared on the soundtrack for Guardians of the Galaxy. I wonder if James Gunn put that song in the soundtrack for Guardians, possibly because of its appearance in Apollo 13, because the song actually performs when the three men are in space and they're doing their nationwide, worldwide broadcast from the shuttlecraft en route to the moon. Yeah, you also got Honky Tonkin' by Hank Williams, Blue Moon by the Mavericks. There's also there's some dialogue pieces that are thrown in, but there, of course, there's also the score by James Horner. The ones that don't have like this one here, All Systems Go to Launch, that's all James Horner. So, overall, this is actually a pretty solid soundtrack release for the movie. That's actually a pretty cool artwork there for the, I think it's holographic too. Either way, that's pretty neat actually. So yeah, that's the film score on CD, the film soundtrack, which is pretty amazing. It's actually pretty easy to get a hold of. I think I got it off eBay for like $5, so it's very easy to get a hold of. So I've spoken about, and the movie, of course, as I've said, was adored by critics, and the film picked up 9 Academy Award nominations. 9 of them. It was nominated for visual effects, production design, sound, film editing, Best Original Dramatic Score by James Horner, so the score was nominated. Yeah, that was back when the Academy decided to split the original score category into 2 categories. Best Original Dramatic and Best Original Comedy Musical. Well, I think by the year it was either 99 or 2000, they just did away with that and they went back to Best Original Score. So anyway, as I've said, the Oscar categories it was up for visual effects, production design, sound, film editing, Best Original Dramatic Score, Best Supporting Actress for Kathleen Quinlan, who played Tom Hanks' character's wife, Marilyn Lovell. Best Supporting Actor for Ed Harris, who was the head of NASA trying to get them back to Earth safely. The movie was up for Best Adapted Screenplay, which, yes, the movie was actually based on a book written by Jim Lovell, who was played by Tom Hanks in the movie. And the film was nominated for Best Picture of the Year. Ultimately, in the end, the film did win 2 of its Academy Awards, winning for sound and film editing. Apollo 13 ultimately ended up losing Best Picture to Braveheart that year. Surprisingly, Ron Howard was denied a Best Director nomination. I'm kind of shocked at that because his directing on the film was incredible. The film received 4 Golden Globe nominations. Best Supporting Actress, Kathleen Quinlan. Best Supporting Actor, Ed Harris. Ron Howard received a Best Director nod at the Golden Globes, and the film was up for Best Motion Picture and Drama. I believe Ron Howard lost that year to Mel Gibson for Braveheart. Best Picture and Drama, I can't recall what movie won. I know Braveheart did not win that year, unfortunately. The film received 2 MTV Movie Award nominations. Tom Hanks got nominated for Best Male Performance, and the film was nominated for Best Movie of the Year, which I believe it lost that year to Seven. Seven was that year's pick for best MTV's pick for Best Movie. And at the Saturn Awards, the film got a nomination for Best Action Adventure Thriller Film. Now, this movie does look like a sci-fi movie because, it's a space adventure film, but the movie is based on real events. It's based on historical events, so naturally, giving it a nomination for Best Action Adventure Thriller Film seemed more appropriate, so it's not science fiction because it's based on real stuff. So, as I've said, the movie itself is amazing, and so is this Blu-ray release. This is actually the second, this is the third time I've owned Apollo 13 on home video. The first I've had the DVD collector's edition released by Universal, which was a pretty solid release of the film. And then I got the Blu-ray, the first Blu-ray by Universal, which was the 15th anniversary edition. And then finally I got this one, the 20th anniversary by Universal, which is it's basically a completely restored version of the film. Yeah, as you can see, the Blu-ray is pretty it's kind of typical for a Blu-ray released by Universal. It's got the usual artwork cover, more or less. Despite all that, the video quality on the disc is incredible. It's actually much better than the 15th anniversary version. So if anybody had owned that version, which, as I've said, it's not a bad release of the film to have. Yeah, I'm fiddling with the, there we go. Yeah, it's not a bad version of the film to have, but the 20th anniversary edition has the upper hand in terms of video, because it's fully restored, brand new film elements, basically, from original 35mm film elements, so it naturally looks way better than the previous version. So, honestly, this time, out of a rating of 5 stars, I'd have to give the video quality for this one probably a solid 5, because that's how good it looks. As for the audio, oh man, this is a loud movie. And as I've said, the film did win the Sound Oscar, so this movie is a loud film. So it's in English DTS HD 5.1, and it sounds really good, and there's a plethora of different audio tracks to listen to. French, European, Spanish, whatnot. So yeah, the audio, once again, this is incredible. So out of 5 stars, I'd give it a 5. The dialogue comes out great, the sound effects are great, all the explosions, all the thrills come out perfectly. As for the bonus material, well, it's pretty much, most of it is basically material from previous versions. In fact, much of the stuff came from the original collector's edition DVD, and some of it was brand new and came from the 15th anniversary edition. There's a couple of brand new things, like Apollo 13, 20 years later, conversation with Ron Howard and producer Brian Grazer, and pretty much all the stuff in the previous versions. There's a pair of commentaries here. Oh, darn it. There we go, sorry. Commentary with Ron Howard, commentary with Jim and Marilyn Lovell. Jim Lovell, of course, as they talk about the movie and, of course, the film based on the events that they unfortunately took place in. Lost Moon, The Triumph of Apollo 13, Conquering Space, The Moon and Beyond. Lucky 13, The Astronaut Story, a bunch of documentaries and featurettes about the film, and of course the events that inspired the movie. U-Control features, Apollo era, and Texplanations. It's based, Texplanations obviously is a U-Control feature that goes into how the tech that they had to deal with back in 1970, and also during the sequences where they had to improvise using scientific research to basically figure out any way possible to keep the men alive. It's pretty much all explained in there. So, as I said, a lot of... Yeah, it looks like there's not really much, because, there's like 3 documentaries, technically 4, 2 U-Control features, and 2 audio commentaries. It doesn't look like a lot, but again, it's all about quality over quantity, and the quality of these extras are incredible. The commentaries are worth listening to, especially Ron Howard, since, talking about his experience on the film and being inspired by the events that literally inspired the movie. So for the extras here, I would say out of 5 stars, it gets a solid 4 out of 5 for me. A nice wealth of material to weave through for a great movie like this. As for the movie itself, Apollo 13 gets a solid 5 out of 5. No denying. This is a great film, great action-adventure movie, great film about disaster and survival. And when it comes to space movies, this movie is one of the best of its kind. I mean, it really is. It definitely ranks up there with Gravity and Interstellar, and I would even put Armageddon up there too. Though I know Armageddon is a film that doesn't measure up to Apollo 13, but to me, I think it does, because again, it's another great space adventure, even though it's flashier and it's more action-packed, but Apollo 13 really doesn't focus. It's not really meant to focus on its action. It's all meant to focus on telling the story, and it's all about getting the 3 men back to Earth safely. And it's really basically it's basically nothing more than a battle for survival. And that's the best way to describe this movie. So all in all, the movie gets a solid pass for me. Like I said, 5 out of 5. The Blu-ray here, the 20th anniversary edition, I'm assuming, yeah, there is a 4K version available, but if you're not into 4K, the 20th anniversary edition is the best one to go for. You can get it on Blu-ray pretty cheap. In fact, you can even get the 15th anniversary edition, I think, pretty cheap too. Either used or new. Go to eBay or Amazon. I actually got this one off Amazon because I actually found it pretty cheap on there. I think I found it for under $10, brand new. So either way, this 20th anniversary Blu-ray is a fantastic version of the film to have. If you absolutely must have any Blu-ray of the movie, this is the one you should grab. So, yes, Houston, we have a problem. And hearing that line from Tom Hanks in the movie is just incredible. Surprised he didn't get nominated for Best Actor for that movie because he did a great job, and all three of the astronaut actors did a great job. Tom Hanks, Kevin Bacon, and Bill Paxton. Yeah, they all did an incredible job in the movie. And as I've said, the soundtrack is great to have. If you're into soundtrack collecting, the soundtrack can easily be found on Amazon or eBay. Like I said, I got it for like almost $5 on eBay, so it's easy to get a hold of. And if you're a fan of James Horner, this is a good soundtrack to listen to. And like I said, it not only has the film score, but it also has, other great songs in the movie too, especially from the time era. So, all in all, this concludes the presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will continue to do more videos in the days to come. So until then, take care and be safe.